Thank you all for joining us as we go through some of the insights from our 2026 Gen AI Adoption Survey. We've been surveying members since early 2024 to get a sense of how advertisers are approaching the use of Gen AI in advertising. And it's been really helpful for cutting through some of the noise in the industry, especially as a lot of insights are either US-based or not necessarily specific to large advertisers. Getting a sense of what's happening here in the UK for large advertisers has been very helpful. So thank you to all of our members that participated. This has been the largest response rate we've had to a survey, any survey while I've been at ISBA, with 200 members participating. And if we go through the agenda, I'm going to talk a bit about some of the insights, but some of the feedback we often get is the insights are quite high level. What do they mean in practice? And for that, I've invited some of my favorite people on these topics to join us and talk about what they're seeing. And so we'll have some interesting conversations as to how these results translate into the real world dynamics. In that is there were three areas that were quite interesting. And one is the relationship between efficiency and effectiveness. And the other is around how agency relationships are changing. And then one that resonates with everyone that's quite personal is how people are actually using it themselves day to day. So as I said, it's the biggest response rate we've had to a survey on Gen AI with exactly 200 people responding. If you're wondering, that sounds like a very round number. We hit 199 in our last working group, and I begged and I pleaded that someone else also that hasn't also fills it out. So we're very happy to hit that. And as you'll see, it's a nice reflection of the types of people from advertisers that engage with ISBA. 32% being from a marketing discipline, quite a healthy response rate from procurement people, and then media, where we are very famous for what we do in media, a very strong response rate from media professionals, while also many from the insights and analytics, legal, public affairs areas. And because we've done this as most of our sessions are for members only, it's quite rare that we open things up to the broader industry. But given there's been a lot of conversation about how things are progressing, I thought this warranted inviting a broader audience. And so for those of you who are less familiar with ISBA, this is a bit of the survey itself was anonymous, so we don't know exactly the organizations that participated, but it was a large representation of our membership. So it'll look something broadly similar to the composition of our membership, which is, as you'll see, predominantly FMCG, retail, finance organizations. So some of the highlights, last year there were a lot of industry pieces quoting 95% of use cases fail, only 5% are really getting value. And so what we're seeing is, it'll come as no surprise, pretty much everyone is engaging or using Gen AI in some form. 76% put efficiency as their primary objective. 65% are using it regularly at work. So this is just in their day-to-day, the use of things like Copilot, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT. And something that's quite nice to see is 14% are reporting a significant or transformational impact to business results. So we're starting to see that impact coming through. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail. Looking at the different audiences and how they responded to questions, where we saw the greatest statistically significant difference across most of the questions was that 14%. They are reshaping their agency relationships. They're vastly more likely to use it in their day-to-day work. They're more likely to be effectiveness-led and to view creative quality and measurement as the largest barriers to delivering even greater results than what they're achieving so far. So policy is where we really started a lot of our questioning back in 2024. And we've now seen 61% are aware that their organization has a policy, and the most common areas for it to cover is around IP and copyright, AI labeling and transparency, and bias and discrimination. So very much legal and reputational. And one of the things that's always been interesting to us is around the environmental and workforce pieces. So it is good to see that some organizations do have this within their policies. And one of the big changes year on year from 2025, many members were aware that they had a policy, but the comprehension of the contents of the policy, we received a lot of people responding, don't know. And this has improved dramatically, as you can see here. The bar on the left is the number of people, proportion of people that reported don't know in 2025 versus the proportion reporting don't know this year, and significant improvement across most. But as you'll see around environmental impact and workforce displacement, still a lot where there's just a lack of awareness. Now, on the impact piece, we've gone with the very punchy line of 14% reporting significant or transformational impact. But it is important to note that 40% are reporting a moderate benefit. And so it's more than half that are starting to see some benefits from their use of AI in their organization's advertising activity to date. If you are interested in what does significant actually mean, the way that we frame this to members was significant is a meaningful improvement in how we operate with demonstrable benefits. And transformational, it has fundamentally changed how we work and deliver clear business benefit. And this is, for me, an interesting one because there's a lot of conversation with members around operating models and organizational design. And I think this shows there's still a lot in the works before we start seeing that truly transformational change. And on that piece around efficiency and effectiveness, we started asking this last year because a lot of the use case in the conversation was very much around efficiency and savings, which we found interesting as the WFA, the World Federation of Advertisers, survey their members every year going back, I think, a decade, maybe longer, on their top priorities. And the number one priority every year, consistently, without fail, marketing effectiveness. So the assumption when we asked this question last year was that the early use cases, efficiency is the obvious place to work. It's doing things that you typically do just faster, better, and a bit cheaper. And the hypothesis we had was that we might see this track more towards effectiveness over time. Not necessarily in the short term, but over say 5 years. Interestingly, year on year, it's actually efficiency is hardened as the primary objective from 65% reporting it as the primary objective last year to 76% this year. And the responses differ quite significantly depending on job discipline. So CMOs and marketing directors more likely, still a minority, but more likely to be prioritizing effectiveness. And interestingly, I think many people would probably not assume procurement to be effectiveness driven or to have to preference efficiency more, but they've come out as the second highest discipline, stating effectiveness as the primary objective in their organization. And yet, when we think about that impact data that we showed, those reporting significant or transformational impact, it's more common for people prioritizing effectiveness to also be reporting significant or transformational impact to business results. So what you see here is 25% of those who are reporting effectiveness as their primary objective are reporting significant or transformational impact, and those who are efficiency-led come in at 11%. So there is quite a large difference or relationship here. But it's important to note that that correlation is not necessarily causation. When I think about the members who are effectiveness-led, they typically have really robust measurement practices. They've got really strong interdepartmental collaboration where there's a shared language of performance. And one of the things for really effective use is that interdepartmental collaboration. We're increasingly hearing more about the importance of working with IT and other parts of the organization in AI steering groups for these sorts of transformations. So it's not necessarily that effectiveness leads to better outcomes, but it is just interesting that there is quite a strong relationship between the two in the member responses. And then we asked, what are the barriers that you're facing to delivering greater benefits? And it's quite different between those who are earlier in their journey. So one of the things that I didn't share was where they are in the journey. But basically, if you're exploring or experimenting, governance comes out as your number one barrier. And if you have launched your use cases or you're scaling, or launching and scaling or pioneering was the third choice, then it becomes more likely that you're going to be saying creative quality. Creative quality comes out as number one for those that are launched. And then measurement rises quite sharply as a priority for those who are live in market. So we asked about 10 different options. I figured that's probably a bit overwhelming to put on the screen, but these were the 5 most common of the 10 that we offered. And as you can see, governance is strong, but creative quality and measurement are quite strong, especially for those who are live in market. And the blockers differ sharply by role, governance being a key blocker for procurement, CMOs and marketing directors, but less likely to be the number one barrier for the other professions. And if you read the report is just for members, but if you read the report, there's a bit more detail as to the differences on blockers reported by discipline. So across the board, agency relationships are changing. That won't be too much of a surprise given there's been a lot of discussion in the industry about this. But the question is, when asking advertisers about their perceived changes to agency relationships and the impact Gen AI is having on them, this is where we see that about 26% are saying significant change to content production agencies, a little bit less with creative and media. And then for content production, it's more than half saying some are significant. So there's still, the change is still in progress and still relatively early days. And as you can see, also impacting creative and media at slightly less than content production. But then when we look at it through the lens of those who are reporting significant impact, the changes reported shift a bit or become a bit more dramatic. So 65% of members reported a change to one of their agency relationships. And from that 65%, we asked them which are the two things that are changing the most. So this is not a reflection of everything that's changing. It's just where advertisers feel the greatest changes coming through. And irrespective of the impact that they're reporting to business results, speed and ways of working are changing for most. As you can see there, I keep calling this hot pink. I don't know if that's the right name for this color, but that's our significant transformational change. Light blue is moderate, and the darker bluish purple is minimal. But across all of them, they're reporting change to speed and ways of working. But where we start seeing the more dramatic change dependent on the results being delivered is scope of work and agency team composition. Those reporting significant transformation are very likely to report changes to scope and agency teams. And these trends are broadly the same across content, creative, and media. So I've not broken it down through each of them because there's just not a significant difference between them. So one of the interesting ones, we had members talking to us about where essentially a couple of members expressed frustrations about getting their agencies to adopt and advance. So we wanted to see if that was reflective of the broader membership as to where change was being driven from. And interestingly, broad mix. So it leans a bit more to client-led, but there's still plenty that are reporting it's a very collaborative process with their agencies, and some reporting that their agencies are really leading that change with them. And so we thought there might be a relationship between this and significant impact. This was one of the few areas where we didn't see statistically significant impact. So irrespective of who's leading the change, it doesn't really have an impact on performance results. As we talk with members, is the realization that to use it really well requires expertise. It requires craft and really knowing your craft really well. And we're starting to see members getting more and more confident in their own personal use of it in their day-to-day work. So this is more in the relationship of how you use Copilot, Gemini, Claude, or who am I forgetting there? In your day-to-day work. Interestingly, we find when we do our Gen AI workshops with members, about 75% have Copilot as their company one. And 65% of members are reporting that they use it regularly in their work. But of them, 28% say it's having a meaningful impact on their performance or the quality of their work. And 37% are saying it's a modest impact. And then as you can see, some are more occasional, and then a minority in that rarely or not using it camp. So we're starting to see people get more confident in their use and build up those skills, which is really reassuring to see. And interestingly, when you look by job description or job function, marketing are the power users really pulling ahead with their regular use and meaningful impact. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Vlad, who is our lead on our Gen AI workshops training, which, as you can see, this is a photo from one of our last ones.